This is the Be Helpful podcast, where conversations with budding entrepreneurs prepare you for the wild journey of building a business or side hustle.
My first deal ever was I was doing an open house for a different brokerage on a development site in Lincoln Park, and an unrepresented buyer came through. She just so happened to be a doctor at University of Chicago. She loved me, right? I barely knew what I was doing. I'm 21 at the time, right? 22. And she ended up loving me and referred me to multiple other doctors and people. And, it was like one of the best relationships I had in my business, because she, after we closed and we ended up getting dinner together, I told her that was my first deal ever. And she was like, I would have never have known.
Yeah,
like, you were so
awesome.
competent and so confident in what you were doing, that I would never have known. And I appreciated all the honest feedback you gave her, because, so I think it's just, I hate the expression fake it till you make it. But I think at the end of the day, what I did, and I think what a lot of good entrepreneurs do, is that they invest in themselves. Mm-hmm. So now that's how I rose to the top, or I rose really fast at the Board of Trade. I started when I was 18, and I think I stopped trading when I was 21. Was because I didn't take lunch breaks. I would sit and just pick all these older traders' brains. Right? Yeah. I would meet them throughout the day, and they would either like you or they didn't like you, right? Because it was a very tough world down there on any exchange floor. It's a very boys' locker room, right? Mm-hmm. It's very cutthroat. Like, you can't screw up, or you get fired, or people just make fun of you.
Yeah.
And instead of taking lunch breaks, and I would do this. Say you work 5 days a week there, I probably would take a lunch once a week, right? Or I would just eat a sandwich real quick throughout, knowing that I would just go and pick these guys' brains because they were still in the pits. And then those guys liked me and they got me jobs, right? Yeah. And then they're like, oh, hey, man, you shouldn't be doing this job. Like, I'd be like, what books should I read? They tell me, I read the book. I go back to them at lunch and say, hey, I don't understand this concept, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand this hedge, or, I don't understand how to create leverage within this trade. And they would talk to me about it. And it's like, and I think I did that as a realtor too. I would pick older guys' brains. I would read books. I would read the Wall Street Journal to help understand what's going on in the bonds, which is going to affect interest rates, which is going to affect, multitude of things. So I think I was just all over, constantly just investing in myself. And that doesn't cost much, right?
Yeah.
Or during the recession, I think I got like 3 accreditations during the recession. Things were slow. I got a foreclosure and short sale, a certified negotiation expert, right? So I focused on what is important for a good realtor to have is good negotiation skills, right? So then I went and got certified in that. And then I became like a seller's representative, like making sure I knew exactly how to market people's homes the best way possible, right?
I really like that tactic because I can relate to it. I'm one that, infamously doesn't take lunch, but I like talking to people. I like picking people's brains. I have 3 older siblings, closest one's 8 years to me, so I'm used to talking to people that are considerably older than me.
Yeah,
and love just the wisdom they give. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier. This podcast is kind of like that for me, right?
Yeah.
Like it's in a world where everything's gone online and everyone is, selling some type of course or some type of framework. For me, I still like the, find a way to talk to a stranger and pick their brain. And this podcast has given me the opportunity to just touch people, right? And talk to them and learn their system. So I 100% agree. Like there's wisdom in just carving out the time to invest in yourself in the way that you learn best, whether it's just, people to people, finding books, taking accreditation courses. I really like that.
Yeah. I mean, even I try to push that onto my team and other agents on my team. Now, they're not wired the same way I am. It's sometimes I get some pushback, but it's like, I even just had an agent on my team where it was a 2-day course. She got a lot of like continuing education credits for it, because she was just in like a tighter financial situation. So it's like, you know what? I will pay for it. right? I'll
Yeah.
invest in you as I continue to do on a daily basis, but like I'm also putting money towards it, right?
Yeah.
So you could hone your skills, right? And that's also as a business owner, like, sure, can I teach a lot of things that they taught her in the class, but I'm also busy, right? So
Yeah.
it's also creating leverage. Like this company will teach her how to be. I think she got it's called accredited buyer, like consultant, like
Yeah.
ABC or something like that. And so now, and when she came back, she's like, "Hey, did you know that we're doing this, and maybe we shouldn't be?" Or, "Hey, did you know that we're doing this, and hey, we're really doing well,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
on this?" And it was just like, "Yeah, great, right." And so now she has more confidence to go out and do her job better
Yeah.
because she's just been trained for 16 hours, 8 hours a day for 2 days.
Yeah. I like that. So I want to go back to the other question I had around negotiation because um, you've talked about how it's one of the most important skills in your business, and for many people, they get really uncomfortable the idea of negotiation. They get very uncomfortable the idea of sales, and um, I'm of the opinion that almost everything is sales. We just don't label it that way because it doesn't look like a used car salesman.
Yeah,
um, and so I'm curious about what are you took a course on how to get better at it, but what are some of the things that you've learned not only in the classroom but then over time that has really guided your philosophy on negotiation?
yeah. I think first off, I think on a interpersonal level, I read the book Freakonomics. Do you ever read that book?
I haven't read the book, but I've listened to the podcast a couple times.
Okay. Well, there was a chapter in there where they compared the Ku Klux Klan to realtors, right? And I was like, and I'll never forget it. I was on a ski trip with some of my friends, and I'm in the middle of a big negotiation for a new client, and who turned out to eventually be, principal at one of the largest consulting firms in the world in
Mhm.
cyber tech. But this was when I knew him in his early 30s, 20 years ago. And we're negotiating a deal. And the book more or less compared the two. And it more or less said that the Ku Klux Klan and realtors use power, like knowledge of power, to put fear into people to ultimately get what
Mm,
they want, right? To manipulate people. And it more or less said a correlation between realtors on average sell their own homes for more money than they sell their clients' homes for, right?
yeah,
And it was kind of like, why is that, right? Because they're willing to fight the extra mile, go the extra inch to do one more rep of going back and hitting the bullet points of whatever you're negotiating on when
right.
it's their own house. But when it's their client's house, they go, 5 grand to you as a seller is not 5 grand to me as a buyer's agent, right? Or a
Right.
seller's agent. I get 2.5% of that. Then I got to split that with my brokerage. So it's way less than that.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I read the chapter on the plane. 2 days later, I'm negotiating with my client, and we walked away. We more or less, I fought over, it was something small, maybe like $5,000 on a
Hmm.
$500,000 property. So 1%. And I
Yeah.
fought for it. And eventually they said they were going to kill the deal. And then I just said, well, that's your choice, right? This is my client's position. We feel like we've, given up enough, and the market will bear, and we'll sell it to the next person. They came back the next morning and said, you got a deal, right? And my
Right.
client was nervous, right? I'm like, no, let's stick to it, right? I treated it like my own deal because I knew the value of the property. I knew the
Yeah.
value of the location. And eventually we got it. And I think from that moment on, the fact that I fought for him over $5,000, I had his loyalty for life, as long as I
Yeah.
don't screw that up, right? And he's bought in 3 or 4 homes and sold 2 homes. So I've done 5 deals with him
Yeah.
over the last like 18 years. And he's referred me lots of business. And so I think part of that is like really trying to put yourself in their position, right? We're as the brokers, we're not as emotional as a seller is. Like I bought
Hmm.
and sold my own property. So every property I've ever purchased, it's been a multiple bid off it situation. So
Hmm.
I am very sympathetic or empathetic to my clients when they're in multiple bid situations because I've been in it myself. But we're
Yeah.
the ones that's supposed to be objective, right?
Yes.
And so I think part of that negotiation is making sure that you don't get emotional, but you stay objective. I think a lot of, and I've been negotiating Probably, I'm 43, so probably since I was like 6 or 7 years old, I got a little gypsy in me. My mom was an antique dealer, and
Yeah.
so she owned an antique store, and she would leave me at the counter, and people would come up, and I dealt with the cashier, like 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. I'm dealing with the cashier, uh, and people are coming in and saying, "Oh, this is priced at 40. Well, I'll give you 20 for it," And so I
Hmm.
grew up haggling, right? So for me, I love it. It's an art, right? And
Yeah.
I think the key to it is really not staying very, very calm, right? Not
Mm.
a lot of agents or a lot of situations, people will raise their voice, they'll start yelling, they might even swear, right? Anytime I see somebody getting angry, I already know that it's based off fear, right?
Yeah.
Like statistically, it's proven anger has a strong correlation with fear. So, like, what are they fearful? Either they fearful they're not going to get the deal for their client, fearful they probably said something they shouldn't have said that their client doesn't know about. And so, I've always just stayed really calm and just stuck to the bullet points of what I'm negotiating, right?
Hmm.
And then obviously try to support that with data, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, here's our offer, and here is 2 or 3 comps that support our price, and this is why we're coming. And guess what? The house next door that is identical. They also had upgraded floors, upgraded kitchen, bathrooms. We put this dollar amount value to those, and this is why we're coming up with this value. So it's like having the structure, having kind of the data to prove it, and not just saying, "Hey, we're throwing in this lowball offer," and not coming with anything. You got to support your position with some kind of data. And I think that comes
Hmm.
back to my, trading and analytical work back in the day, because it's like you can't really, facts tell, stories sell is kind of a great expression,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
like, what story are we building with this negotiation, right? And I think that is probably one of the things that has won me more multiple offers and has helped me sell my clients' properties for more money than the average. We historically, over like the last 15 years, say the average market, we exceed the market by 3 to 4%. So the average list
Mm.
price in Chicago right now is about 99% list price to sell price, because we're in a low inventory market, and
Hmm.
it's a seller's market, right? I think last year we were at 102%, so we beat it even in like the best market. We still
Yeah.
outperformed by 3%. Historically, so for the last like 20 years, it's been about 95% list price to sell price average, 95, 94 on the north side of Chicago.
Yeah.
We're exceeding at like 98, 99%,
It's
right?
amazing.
And so I think a lot of it has to do with that. So it's not only telling the story, supporting it, but it's also building a relationship, a rapport with the opposite person, right?
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
kind of like, if I know the agent, I know my clients like it, I'll just ask them like, "Hey, what's new with you?" Or, "Hey, how's your kids?" Or, "Hey, what's new? How's the business?" And we talk. And so it's like you get people to like you, right? You
Yeah.
get people to trust you, right? And
Yeah.
so when you're at it and that opposing realtor is negotiating with you and they're getting emotional, it's like, "Hey, man, we want the same things here. Let's bring this
Yeah.
back to the table. Our clients hired us to get deals from. Your client hired you to sell it for the most amount of money. My clients hired me to buy it for the least amount of money. Let's work together here. Okay. Let's make it a win win for both of us." Right. And so just literally having that straight conversation sometimes and bringing it back, like, "Hey, or like, I'd say a tip that has worked really well for me negotiating over the years is really trying to coach up the opposite agent about, "Hey, have you talked to your client the fact that, you know, um, sales are down 5% in this neighborhood over the last 12 months,
Yeah.
right? Have you told them that, days on market has increased 22%, right? Like, whatever it is, like knowing the data, knowing the information, and then educating the other realtor on it,
Yeah.
right? And just kind of like, "Hey, your client know that the electric needs to be updated in the property, and that's going to be probably about $15,000. Well, no, we never had that conversation. Hey, do me a favor, have a conversation with your client, let her know this is where we're coming in, this is why we're coming in, and let's try to make this work," right? And all of a sudden they come back and, are willing to split that $15,000. And guess what? My client was willing to accept the deal, but now I just got him $7,500,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm protecting their bottom line. So it just kind of, building the relationships, staying calm, and collected, which is key, right?
Mm,
I'll never forget it. My wife, about a couple years ago, I was negotiating with the number one agent in Chicago. I'm not going to name names, but big guy, good agent in general, really knowledgeable. But he was getting really hot and heated, swearing at me on the phone. My wife walks in the room, was just like, and then we hung up. She's like, "Oh my gosh, who is that?" And I tell her, right? And it's because he was anxious and nervous that his client. I knew his client really wanted the property, and he was just trying to get the best deal possible. And when we weren't budging, and I was just kind of hitting him with the facts and being
yeah.
calm, he was getting worked up because he wasn't having any progress with me,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the same way. Like, you go to Morocco and you go to some of these places around the world where they have these amazing markets, and they're selling you beautiful silver bracelets. They'll start at $200, and then all of a sudden, by the time you walk away, right, they're down to $50,
Yeah.
right? And then it's when you come back the next day and get it for 40, you
Right.
know? And so,
It's it's fascinating because in the consulting world, negotiations happen just slightly differently, but some of the principles are the absolute same. I love the whole, don't get emotional, because I feel like once I see emotion, I know that I have all the leverage, right? And for me personally, just my personality, sometimes that makes me uncomfortable because now it's do I take advantage, balancing with my own ethics and the relationship and the trust that I've built. So it sometimes does put me in an awkward position. But um, one of the things that I would always do is exactly what you said, which is, okay, I'm going to build rapport with you and we're going to build an authentic relationship. And then I'm going to immediately start with, what do you most want with this? I know what I want. But if I understand what you most want,
yeah,
then we can start laying out the options. And we have this thing in consulting where you present the client with three options, knowing they're always going to pick the middle. So you give them, hey, here's the thing with all the bells and whistles, and this price is just a little uncomfortable for you, but it has some things that you really, really, really would love. If it's like the specific type of appliances that you really want, you don't need it, but you would love to have it.
yeah,
Then on the other end of the spectrum, you hit them with a few things that they really, 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 really want, but they don't need, but it's going to be uncomfortable if they accept it. And you know that they're just going to land somewhere in the middle where they get a little bit of what they want, a little bit of the thing they need. And that's really how you find those win-wins. And so negotiation, I feel like it sometimes gets this bad rap of this adversarial relationship where really it's, if you can honestly have the data and the information that justifies, hey, this is what I need out of this deal, and I understand that this is what you need out of this deal, let's just have a conversation of how we put this puzzle together. And yes, I'm going to get some of the things I want, you're going to get some of the things that you want, but at least we're going to walk away feeling good rather
yeah.
than feeling taken advantage of,
No, and that's good. And I think that's purely when I'm working with buyers. And in the last 2 years since the pandemic, again, it's we've already had low inventory since 2012,
Mm,
but really, everybody was kind of anticipating and projecting in 2021 that the real estate market was actually going to go down. Right,
mm,
there's leading indicators and there's lagging indicators in real estate. Right, one leading indicator is days on market. One of the lagging indicators is actually price. You know what I mean?
mm.
And
Yeah.
so we were seeing in 2020, or sorry, in 2019, and we thought in 2020 the market was actually going to go down. Right, interest rates were going up, the market was going to go down by 1 or 2%, like, or stay flat, but it was just going to hover there. And then the pandemic happened, shut down, and then everybody could work from home. The Fed manipulated rates, dropped it to create stimulus, and
Mm,
then everybody was buying because didn't want to live in their little 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom condo in a high rise. They wanted to go live in a 3 bedroom in a bigger neighborhood with more outdoor space and this or that. Or people wanted to move to single families, or people who were waiting to move all of a sudden said, "Well, now's the time, right?"
right.
And so we're going to move to the suburbs and get that big house with a big yard. And So when you're negotiating in a low inventory for buyers, there's always multiple offers. I mean, we just lost one in 17 offers, right?
Mm.
And 17 offers is kind of unheard of before the pandemic. You might get 5, you might get 6, you might get 7. We get a lot of those, but like once you start getting over a dozen, 15, it's crazy. And for the last 2 years, we've probably done 20 or 30 deals that had over 15 offers to 30 offers, right? And
Wow.
so you kind of get lost in there. So the question is always, hey, seller's agent, what is important to the seller? Their number
Right.
99% of the time, it's price, right? So you could have all the data you want, it goes out the window when there is not a lot of comps that support the price, and then but your clients really want it because there's low inventory and it's in the neighborhood they want and the school district they want or whatever it is, and then you're stuck as the advisor to them to be like, okay, how do I manage this when the market's crazy, when I don't see that there's value over too much over the list price, but then there's
Hmm.
already this many offers, somebody's
Right.
overpaying. At the end of the day, I worked through a recession in real estate, so I'm very risk adverse, right, for
Mm.
my clients. So I generally have a rule of thumb. I anticipate worst case scenario if you have to sell your house in 1 to 2 years. So you buy this place thinking you're going to live there for 5, 7, 10 years, but if you have to live it in 2, what can I sell it for?
Yeah.
What am I projecting that I could sell it for in a year or two? And then what all the fees are included in that, and then I give them a cap, but I educate them on all that,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that at least they know buying into it that what are the costs if they get into a pinch ahead of time, right? Which is, I don't know, I don't think a lot of realtors actually go to that depth, right?
Hmm.
And then also kind of like, this is what your potential risk is if you sell the house in 2 years, right? You
Yeah.
overpaid for it, and then you have all these fees on top of it. So
Right.
you more or less potentially just lost your down payment,
Right.
right? Depending on what you're putting down as a down payment. So,
Yeah.
and then you let them make the decisions to some degree, right? And there are certain times where you say, uh, I wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
Like I say
Yeah.
that all the time. Like, but again, my threshold for risk is different than maybe your threshold for risk,
Right.
right? Where you bought, it's an up and coming area. You're like, hey, you know what? I'll pay a premium for this because in 10 years, this neighborhood is going to be popping and it'll have appreciated and I'm going to make money on this,
Yeah.
right? So everyone's thresholds are different. So
Absolutely.
it's finding the rhythm between it all, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the negotiations is even, I try not to really ever negotiate with my clients because at the end of the day, like I'm not here to sell you anything. And I tell this to people up front. I try to set the expectation up front,
Yeah.
right? Because it also is, I don't need it for myself because I already, this is the way I am. But I tell them
Hmm.
up front so then they know right away, especially if it's not a relationship I know, you will never get a sense that I'm trying to sell you anything. If you ever
Right.
feel like I'm trying to sell you something, please let me know right away because we'll have a conversation about it. Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an unusual thing to say to a client. Like,
Yeah.
but I want to set the expectations. Like, I'm not here to sell you anything here. I'm here to consult you, educate you, and give you the most information I have. So you can make the best decision at hand with the information we have. And that's all
Yeah.
we could do regarding anything in life.
Yeah.
Right.
I
And
really, I
that's,
really like the term of consultant.
yeah.
I really like the use of that term. Yeah.
Yeah, we use it all the time because it's, technically, and a lot of realtors will have salesperson or something like that. But for years, my card said real estate consultant,
Hmm.
right? So I become a salesman more when I'm actually selling somebody's house, and then I got to market it, and I got to sell it to a buyer and their agent, and then the bank, right?
Yeah.
So generally, I say you have to sell a house 3 times, right? You have to sell it to the buyer, you have to sell it to the realtor, and you got to sell it to the bank, right? Because they're going to have their
Yeah.
appraiser come by. So whatever
Yeah.
price you're pushing the market to, you have to understand the buyer's going to come in educated most likely. They're going to have the data through their agent. The agent's also going to push back if the price is too high, and then you have the bank who's going to also run an appraisal, run comps, and verify whether or not it's worth what it's worth. So
Yeah. I like it. So I got one more question before
yeah,
we jump into some of the concluding questions. But as an entrepreneur, I'm curious about what misconceptions or fears you had going in to being a business owner, and how you overcame them or um, addressed the challenges.
Yeah. I probably thought, I think first off, probably the biggest misconception of being a business owner or an entrepreneur is the fact that I didn't think I could afford it, right? I didn't think
Mm,
I could afford an assistant. I didn't think I had enough time or skill set to hire other people to build a team out. Um, there was a lot of self doubt, right? Because I've just been a solopreneur. Is that how you say it?
yeah, yeah,
Um, so no one's ever taught me this stuff. I could read as many books as I want, but to actually go out and implement it is another thing. And then actually to put your money where your mouth is, right?
yeah,
And that could be as simple as spending the money and buying a CRM, right? So then you could stay in communication with your clients. I don't care if you're doing a appliance repair company, whether you're
yeah,
selling carpet, whatever it is, you need to stay in touch with the people in your world, right? And what's helping you remind you of that? What's keeping you, you know, uh, involved in the day to day tasks and keeping you on track, right? Because doing it on a notepad only works for so long,
yeah,
right? And so I think that was kind of really, you know, can I afford the systems? Can I afford the people to create leverage in my world so that I can actually expand, so that I can grow, right?
mm,
So I think that's probably one of the biggest, misconceptions. I think people wait too long to spend money,
mm,
right?
yeah,
And I get it because I was there for a really long time. But if I could tell what I tell agents now, and the education and the coaching that I give to other younger agents is really invest in yourself, right? Constantly be working on growing your mind and your experience and meeting with people and leveraging that, but then also actually spending money to make money,
yeah,
right? And so, realtors have a star effect. We see a shiny little object, new marketing, new website, right? Yelp calls me and says, "Oh, I could get you to the top of the list," right? Google calls me and says, "You could do these AdWorks, get you to
mm,
the top of the list," right? It all costs money, right? And so, and I've gone here, I've gone there, right? And really understanding, like giving it, doing the due diligence, asking the right questions, and then actually implementing it, but also putting a timestamp on it, right? So if this doesn't give me a 2 to 3x return within 90 days to 6 months, then I'm going to cancel it,
yeah,
right? And really, it's like, and then are you doing the right activities around whatever money you're spending, right? I could go and spend money on Zillow leads, right? Um, but if I don't actually pick up the phone, if I don't return their phone calls, and if I don't actually follow through on the things that I say I'm going to do, well, then it's all for nothing,
yeah,
right? And I
yeah,
think any business owner could say the same thing, and be in the same mistake, and make the same mistakes.
yeah. No, I really like the, you know, one encouraging people to spend the money to make more money, but then also say, okay, think of it like an experiment.
Yeah,
Here's a time frame. If you're not achieving that goal, then you can sit back and say, you know what, it wasn't worth it. It didn't yield the benefit that it needs to. But ultimately, it's a lesson that you learn from. So I like
yeah,
that.
and then revisiting that every year,
Hmm.
right? So, one thing I've spent money on since 2012. So, what are we talking? 11 years now. I bought leads from Zillow, right? So it's one way. My business has always been word of mouth, word of mouth, word
Hmm.
of mouth. And I went to a seminar once, and it blew my mind. And this super successful business owner was just like, in real estate, was more or less like, there's probably 300 agents in the room, and he raised his hand, asked everybody in the room, like, "Hey, who here is 100% referral based business?" 99% of every agent in that room raised their hands, and he's like, "Your referral business should only be 30 to 40% of your business.
Hmm.
You constantly have to be building your pipeline. You constantly have to be finding more people, more names and numbers and contacts to add to your database so that you can market to them,
Yeah.
right? And put them on drip campaigns and build those relationships and meet them for coffee and invite them." We do a lot of events,
Hmm.
and for our sphere, our friends and our family. So whether it's like we have our next event is we're doing an Easter egg hunt, right? In Lincoln Park, right? So we have, last year I think we had about 50 or 60 kids, right? We had bought like 300 or 400 eggs, 500 eggs, right? We hire a bunny, we have, coffee, donuts, things like that for the adults, and just a good time to bring people together, right? And have conversations. How can I get in front of my clients? How can I get in front of my sphere and actually connect with them, right?
Yeah.
And add value, because as a business owner, quite often we're always asking for withdrawals from people, our relationships, and we're not making enough deposits.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's one of the things I've learned at Keller Williams is like, how do I make more deposits into people's lives? So when I do need to make a withdrawal, there's some margin there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Give 9 times before you ask.
That's
on the 10th. Yeah.
Yeah. That's also like the follow-up rule, right? Like one thing, again, I've kind of always been a little bit of an anti-sales guy, is I used to follow up with people 3, 4, 5 times, and then I would quit because I'm like, oh, I don't want to bother them. But honestly, I tell my agents now, like our number now is 10, right? So statistically, a lot of times people finally have a breakthrough at the 8th or 9th or 10th or 11th contact, right? Because then people are like, oh, hey, I'm sorry, we've been busy. Thank you for following up with us. Hey, we're 3 months out, right?
Yeah.
And it just like, okay, great. Would you like me to follow up in 2 months? Sure, that sounds good. Then putting it into that CRM that you pay for, right? And not just putting, or putting it into your phone right away, but like having some place to like have the systems in place so that you can follow through. And I think the mistakes I made as a young business owner was I have it written on my board, follow up, follow back, and follow through, right? So it's like I would follow up, I would maybe follow back, but I never really followed through.
Yeah.
Right. Because I gave up because I was like, I don't want to bother them. But it's like people will tell you, most times people will tell you if you're bothering them and be like, please take me off your call list, or, hey, do this, but most of the time they're just like, hey, I really appreciate you taking the effort. Some people get it and some people don't. Right. And you're not going to be able to please everybody, be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
And that's as simple as that.
I like that.
The good thing about being a business owner, a lot of times we often think like, the consumer picks us, right? They have the choice, but we actually as business owners also have the choice. Do we want to work with these people? Do you want to take on this business, right? And we don't give ourselves enough credit. When you're young in your industry or your business, you're just looking for a paycheck, right? You're just looking to try to survive, right?
Yeah.
You continue to grow, right? You have more opportunities to kind of say, hey, what am I willing to take on? What I'm not willing to take on.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a hard one. I'm still learning that lesson myself, because sometimes you could tell a client's going to be really tough, or they have unrealistic expectations, or like any relationship, they have an uncommunicated expectation. And when that uncommunicated expectation isn't met, there's a breakdown, right? The beautiful thing about like marriage, I think, is it's the same thing. Once there's a breakdown, there's also an opportunity for a breakthrough, right? You just have to have the mindset for it, right? So every mistake I've ever made in my job has led to a breakthrough in my job and the service I give my clients. And maybe I swore at a realtor or I got emotional, and I learned from that. I learned from that mistake, right? I don't make the mistake more than twice,
Yeah.
Because it's like, that's not the business I want to run.
If you found this video to be helpful, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. If you're an entrepreneur and want to share your journey and be helpful to others, please hit us up on our social media channels, or you can shoot us an email at behelpfulpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. Be helpful.